Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I'm with the Strive Group. And welcome to the webinar on the growth mindset. So we've got a guest with us today. Her name is Diane Decker. And before I turn over the reins to her, I'll just let you know a little bit about the format of what you can expect in this 30 minutes, as well as where can you go for additional information. So first, format. The format is a simple Q&A format. So Diane has put together 5 or 6 frequently asked questions specific to a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. She's going to weave in her insight and expertise on this theory in times of disruption, because clearly we're in times of disruption with the COVID-19 pandemic. Tomorrow's topic is staying focused when your world is on fire. Monday's topic is public relations and communications, which will be a great one for business owners and managers alike to deal with during these times of disruption. So feel free to pop back on to this exact same URL to view those webinars. While the live recording is taking place, you can submit questions to Diane via the chat function, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you happen to be watching this on playback, you'll lose your opportunity for submitting questions directly, but you can always submit those questions to either Diane directly, and her contact information will be the very last slide of this webinar, or you can submit those questions to me at the Strive Group, and we will make sure to channel those to Diane, and Diane will be able to answer them directly. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Diane. As I said earlier, she's got about 5 or 6 frequently asked questions, and I will pop in and out of the screen to feed Diane the questions that we're getting from the viewers. So Diane, thank you very much for being here, and take it away.
Thanks for having me, Heather, and thanks for anyone else on the line that's joined us. This is one of my favorite topics. When I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, I recognized myself in a lot of it in terms of growing up and into my adulthood. I recognized a lot of the opposite of the growth mindset and the fixed mindset for myself. And I was also able to appreciate how I've developed more of a growth mindset over the course of time as well. Some by design and some by pure luck, I think, being surrounded by people who helped nurture it in me. But when you think of babies learning to crawl and how they just kind of barge forward and do it, they're just out there attempting to crawl and to walk. They fall down, they might get frustrated, but they just keep on doing it and practicing it, and are eventually able to do it. But as we get older, we're able to, and we start to be able to evaluate ourselves. Things change, right? We think, you know, should I join the swim team if I'm not already a good swimmer? Should I take that harder math class? Should I take that opportunity to sign up for that leadership class? And some of us start to become a lot more afraid of those types of challenges and of making mistakes. And we start to make meaning of those mistakes and very conscious of what does it say about us. If I do this thing, is it going to protect my identity as smart or athletic or talented? Or if I do this thing, is it going to possibly expose me as not being as smart or as athletic or as good of a leader as people seem to think I am? And so, as I mentioned, author Carol Dweck and researcher Carol Dweck became fascinated by this. Like, what makes some students, she was in the educational field, and she thought, what makes some students so caught up in proving their ability versus whereas other people can just kind of let go of proving and just focus on improving. And she found that what that thing was whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And depending upon which one you have in particular areas of your life, it could profoundly affect the way that you lead your life and determine, you know, are you going to be able to be the person that you want to be and achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. And so she found that people have one of two definitions to ability. They have this thought that my intelligence, my abilities, my talents, they're either fixed in time and I can't change those things, and so therefore they need to be proven, or they're changeable, that there's no telling um, what my ultimate potential is if I'm willing to put the time and the effort into developing those things. People who believe that, yes, we all maybe come to the starting point with a certain level of talent or ability, and maybe we can't all be an Einstein or a Beethoven or a Michael Jordan. However, there's no telling what you could be, what your ultimate potential is, until you get in there, be willing to work hard, and be willing to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So when people have that mindset, that growth mindset, that I am focused on improving, not proving something, I believe that I can change my I'm arriving here at a certain starting point, but I can change that. We become more open to feedback. It's not that feedback stings. It doesn't sting. It may still hurt. However, we're much more likely to take that feedback and think, what can I learn from this and how can I get better, versus feeling it as a whole identity and as though that defines us completely and we can't change it. So we're much less likely to avoid challenges, avoid feedback, etc. Heather, do you have a question?
I do. A question just came in, and it is, Diane, is there an assessment, similar to, gosh, am I a right brain thinker, left brain thinker? Am I this on the Myers-Briggs scale or something else? Is there an assessment one could take to provide us with a little self-insight on whether or not we are typically in a growth mindset or a fixed mindset?
I haven't seen a formal assessment in the sense of, like you mentioned, a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or an emotional intelligence. It's not to say that there's not one out there. However, I have seen both in the book as well as other places online, self-assessments that are more in a format of, answer these questions, and depending upon how you answer them, it gives you an indication of where you fall on that scale. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume it makes sense. So again, when you have a growth mindset, also effort is a huge part of this. So it's that sense of, I'm going to start something not expecting myself to be perfect or flawless right away. I'm going to know that it's more about learning something over the course of time, confronting challenges and making progress. And failure has a very different meaning from when you're coming from a growth mindset. You're thinking of failure as I failed at something versus I am a failure, right? You're experiencing it as a thing that happened versus an entire identity all in itself. And having a growth mindset doesn't mean that you believe that you have to put full effort and accept any challenge that comes your way. It's about deciding, is this thing something that I value? Is it worth putting my time and energy and effort into? And if so, I'm ready to jump in there. I'm willing to accept that it's going to be hard and that I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but I'm going to learn from those mistakes and keep trying to get better. So how does that, did Heather flip forward? I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fixed mindset first. How does, I'm going to contrast with the fixed mindset just a bit. So we talked about the growth mindset, and just to reiterate, so that you can think for yourself, do I have more of a fixed mindset in a particular area? And this could be, you may experience this like, in an athletic sports world, I have one type of a mindset, but at work, I have a different type of mindset, etc. So you could have a different mindset in different aspects of your life. So listen to some of these things from a fixed mindset point of view and think, does that sound like me? So again, it's about making decisions about whether or not to do certain things and deciding, will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected, etc. We may all have some of that to some extent, but we're not letting those drive our decisions as much as we do when we're in a fixed mindset. Again, being in a fixed mindset oftentimes can make us play it safe. It makes us much more susceptible to feeling rejected as a person and avoid getting any feedback that might be negative. And it also affects our interest. If we're in a fixed mindset, we might be interested in something initially, but if it gets hard or if we feel like we're not good at it, we're much more likely to quit and check out of it. And we're way less likely to value effort when we're in a fixed mindset. So any questions before I move on, Heather?
No, there are no questions, and I do apologize for advancing your slide too quickly. I just got about the next question. So here you go.
Okay. So thinking of growth mindset during this kind of unprecedented time for any of us, and at least in our lifetimes, right? This COVID pandemic that we're going through, and thinking about how could having a growth mindset or cultivating, either trying to cultivate more of a growth mindset or thinking, I think I already do have a growth mindset. How could I really leverage that during this time? So because growth mindset is so focused on what can I learn, I think it's particularly relevant to this time that we're in because none of us have experienced this type of thing before. So reminding ourselves that everybody is learning right now. We're having to learn so much. We're having to learn about what is this virus? How do I keep from getting infected? How do I keep from spreading the virus to ourselves? What are the latest guidelines on what I'm supposed to be doing or not doing? How do I work from home? How do I learn all these virtual learning systems? How do I help support my kids? How does my whole family coexist together for this many hours at one point in time? There's so much learning to be done. What are all these new regulations that the Strive group is trying to help educate on? There's so much learning, and it's really challenging in many, many ways. So a growth mindset can help us remember that none of us are going to be perfect going through this thing. Not being perfect and not understanding and getting it all right away isn't a reflection on how intelligent we are, how talented we are, how creative we are. It just means that it's going to be really hard and we're going to have to face a lot of challenges and work through them. And we're probably going to make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, it might mean we're not out there trying to do whatever we can do. We're not out there trying to learn as much. We're not really being as creative as maybe we could be about how we get work done in a different way than we were before. Some of us are facing really tough situations with our businesses. We're thinking, how do I keep my business afloat? I've got employees that are working for me. I'm worried about them, etc. So reminding ourselves that it's going to take work to get through those challenges, and it's going to be challenging, and we're not alone in that, and we're probably not going to be perfect as we work through that. Also, less likely to define ourselves as a failure, as I mentioned, that if we're losing our jobs or we're seeing our business go under or we're super sad about having to lay our employees off, remembering that these are tough times that we're going through, but it's not defining you as a person and who you are as having failed. It means that we're all going through unprecedented times and having to figure out our way through it. Also, having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Go ahead, Heather.
No, you go ahead. I have one follow-up from a viewer from something you said earlier, but keep going and then
okay. I wanted to also point out that growth or fixed mindset can also apply to relationships as well. So if we have a fixed mindset about relationships, it can sometimes make us think, well, if this relationship with this person takes work or effort, or is challenging and isn't perfect all the time, then it makes us, and we believe that we ourselves and other people are fixed, and can't learn and grow and change with feedback, then it makes us much less likely to give each other feedback and be willing to work on relationships. And I think many of our relationships are extremely strained or have the potential to be very strained during this time, and reminding ourselves that continuing to have conversations with each other and give each other compassion and grace as we go through those things is going to be really key to maintaining those relationships.
All right. So Diane, the question was, you had said something earlier about how a growth mindset requires effort. And so the question is specific to that is, Diane, do you have any tips on, how to remind ourselves either throughout the day or, in the morning or something, but what are the tips to remind ourselves to make the effort? So as soon as you answer that, is it okay to advance the slide, or should I stay on this slide?
Stay on the slide, because I'm going to talk about leading your
Thank
team.
you.
So interesting that you asked that question, because I was just thinking today about how the things that we value are inextricably linked to pain and suffering and problems, right? I was thinking how, think of some of those things that felt like problems a few weeks ago, like, I have to, redo all my slides for a particular training, and I don't feel like doing it right now, right? Well, when that training gets postponed or canceled and you don't have that thing that you ultimately were looking forward to doing and would have enjoyed, you remind yourself, like, I wouldn't mind having those problems again, right? Or thinking about being in your house with your kids, and you're all trying to work through these things, and it can be painful, and people can be getting on each other's nerves. Yet you value those people in your life, and yes, you could make those problems go away if you didn't have those people in your life, but you want them in your life, and those are you can't de-link the two. And so for me, that's can be helpful in thinking about connecting it to what I value. This is hard, and what do I value that makes this effort worth it? And if you're not feeling like the effort is worth it, that's a whole nother question, right? Like, maybe I need to reassess what I really value at this moment in time. The other tip I would give you is that a quote I read somewhere, I wish I could attribute it to somebody, but it was you don't have to feel like doing something in order to do it. So I tell myself that a lot. If you're waiting for motivation, it's probably never going to come. So is this thing important enough to you to do? Don't wait till you feel like doing it, just do it. Okay, so thinking about how a growth mindset could help you lead your team. So one way is just reminding yourself that this is hard for everybody. Thinking about acknowledging and validating what's stressful for people, reminding people on your team, hey, none of us have ever done this before. This is challenging. It's going to be hard work. We're going to make mistakes along the way. We're all trying to figure this out. We're going to try these things, and then we're going to readjust if needed. We're going to be much more willing, when we have a growth mindset, to admit that we're not perfect. We're going to be much more willing to admit, hey, I don't know everything. I tried this, it didn't work. We're going to be much more likely to accept feedback from the people on our team about what's working or not working. We're going to be more likely in a growth mindset to be open to, not only be open to suggestions from people on our team, but actively be soliciting them. as opposed to when we're in a fixed mindset and feeling like all of these things that we're doing are somehow saying something about us, like how good a leader I am, how smart I am, how talented am I at leading through a crisis. If we're caught up on proving those things, we're going to be much less likely to welcome feedback and be willing to incorporate those things and make adjustments along the way. Another thing to remember is to praise the other people on your team for their hard work and their effort, right? Not just only get caught up purely on the outcomes, but acknowledge and validate people when you can see that they're doing everything they can to work through these things and try to come up with new things. And just accept that some of that's going to come your way, and recognize and have compassion for yourself when you do get some of that criticism or blame, and recognize that's a human nature thing, and you can make a choice as to how you respond to that. Any questions before I move on to our last one?
Yes, I'm popping in. So not only do I have an observation, Diane, but I also have another question from a viewer. So first, my observation, and you may remember because we worked on this project together, but there was a leader in our community that I think she did make the effort every day. Her organization was really struggling. They had been through a heck of a lot of disruption and morale was super duper low. And she decided to have like a mantra, right? And so you may know which leader I'm thinking about. Her mantra was, you know what, we are in transition, and that's okay, right? She always followed her mantra with that's okay, right? So very, very positive and encouraging. And then when she'd see little pockets, when employees would have more of a positive or an optimistic theory or attitude about something, she'd point it out and she'd say, there we go, we're in transition and that's okay. And so that became a mantra. And so my question before I get to the viewer's question to you is that kind of what you mean when you're telling us as leaders to encourage it, recognizing a growth mindset when we see it, maybe celebrating that little pocket of success? Is that what you're thinking about, is kind of what she did, what this other leader did?
Yes, with the caveat, not as in contrast to what you just said, but just to make sure that anybody listening doesn't misinterpret what I'm saying, because I think sometimes we get so focused on being positive that we don't let that people start to feel not okay about feeling not okay, right? I think it's important to acknowledge and validate to people that you are going to feel scared and worried. You are going to feel frustrated, and that we don't make people feel bad about feeling those things. We just acknowledge that this is all part of getting through this thing. We're going to have these feelings and experiences. So what can we do? What's within our control and what can we do? And it's probably going to take effort and hard work, and it's going to take trying things and then having to reassess what we tried, and it's all about learning, right? So yes, with that caveat.
Got it. And so you kind of just answered the viewer's question, although perhaps not, so feel free to add a little bit more. But the question, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's about the negative Nellies or the negative Neds in the workplace, sort of the Eeyores that walk around very pessimistic. I don't think you're saying that pessimism is the same as a fixed mindset, nor do I think you're saying that optimism is the same as a growth mindset. And so I think what the question is, because it reads, do you come across looking like a cheerleader to the negative people in the workplace, and almost like an insincere cheerleader? So again, I don't quite know if that's the real question, but maybe you could just talk a little bit about optimism versus growth, negativism or negative attitudes versus fixed, and how that might appear on the surface if someone were observing a leader in a growth mindset.
Yeah, I think that's closely linked to what I was trying to emphasize earlier. Is I think it's hard for anybody to move forward and use this smarter prefrontal cortex part of our brain when they're really in threat mode and they're scared and they're worried, frustrated, whatever it is. It's harder to move them to use this part, like what's in my control, what can I do now, until we first acknowledge whatever that threat is. So it doesn't mean we have to stay in it with them and just stew in it all day long. But people are much more likely to be willing to engage with you on solutions if you can first say something that makes them feel like you get it. I get it. You're worried about your job. None of us know what's going to happen. It's scary to think about being in the hospital. You know, whatever it is that somebody's worried about, those are real feels, real fears and real feelings. And to try to, if people feel dismissed about those, they're going to check out on you. So acknowledging that those are real fears and concerns, and none of us have the crystal ball that says what's going to happen. So we just have to figure out what is within our control and move forward from there. So I think acknowledging that it is hard and acknowledging that effort is a big part. I think that helps you sound not just like oh, we're going to get through this and it's going to be easy. Just everybody just move forward, right? You need to, I think, acknowledging that it is hard, it is scary. There are certain things we're not going to know, and we have to move forward in the face of those things. So, which gets to if you think you have more of a fixed mindset, how can you develop a growth mindset? So the first thing is really paying attention to your self-talk, really thinking about when things get hard, what do I say to myself? When things are difficult, when I'm thinking about trying something new, I'm listening to my self-talk and thinking, does that sound more fixed or does that sound like more of a growth mindset? We're also thinking about having that compassion for ourselves, thinking about, am I talking to myself in the same way that I would to a friend who came up to me and said, all these things that I'm experiencing, what would I say to a friend versus how am I talking to myself? Notice when you're judging yourself. Notice when you're passing up chances or opportunities for leadership. Another suggestion I really love is when you find yourself thinking, I can't, right? Like, I can't do this, like, it's too hard. First saying, is this something I value? Is it worth working toward? And then add yet. I can't do it yet, right? If I keep working on it and trying new things, is there a possibility I could get there? Some people will feel like having self-compassion is kind of lowering the bar for yourself and will keep you from maybe doing the things that you need to do. But the research will say that if we have more self-compassion and more allowance for ourselves to keep learning and to have it be okay that we make mistakes, we're actually more likely to stick with things and keep working at it because we're not thinking it defines us as the end-all be-all. And the last thing I would say is just reminding yourself of other tough things that you've been through before and how you got through those, and how can you apply those same qualities or skills to this new situation.
Wow. So Diane, I personally have about 800 questions, but I have your phone number so I can call you at any time. I feel like I'm quite privileged compared to others who need your work phone number and your work email. But I can't thank you enough for joining us today for this very quick 30 minutes. I mean, you had 7 questions plus a couple of extra, and you just didn't miss a beat. So thank you very much for that. For the viewers out there, I'd ask that you tune in again. As a reminder, the Strive Group is offering daily webinars. We're trying to identify topics that are top of mind for our clients, our peers, members of the community, based on what we're all seeing out on social media or in the news, or we're hearing from our friends and family. So we're adding to our schedule every day. Right now we have programming up to about April 20th, 22nd, I think, is we've got those dates filled, but we're continuing to fill more dates. If you have an idea of a topic that you'd like to see us cover, feel free to email that suggestion to info@thestrivegroup.com. If you have a particular question for Diane, I'm going to advance the slide and you can have her email contact information. You could ask her specifically about growth and fixed mindsets. Diane will join us again later on the month. We don't know the topic yet, but she's a wealth of information, so we'll assign her something, I promise. But this webinar will be available via playback in about 5 minutes or so on our website. Feel free to join or to visit the website to get that playback, as well as all of the webinars we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. This is Diane's contact information, her website, the services that she provides. I've known Diane for years, and I know her expertise and her insight has clearly been very valuable to me as a business leader and professional, but I have direct information from many of our shared clients that she is a godsend. So please don't hesitate to reach out to her if you need services.
I just noticed a typo I didn't catch. My phone number is off by a digit. It's actually 5516 if anyone needs that.
Oh, there we go, 5516. That's I'll take full responsibility for that, Diane, since I put this deck together.
I was the last one to edit.
You were just probably too enamored with your great picture. You're like, oh, look at that. You don't even notice your phone number is being wrong. Anyway, so again, so the correction to Diane's phone number is 907-240-5516. Everything else on this slide is correct. So thank you for viewing. Again, this will be available via playback shortly. And Diane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, bye.